My driveway is mine. It's been there long before my neighbor Bob moved in. But now this arrogant bastard is standing on my property, smugly claiming that my entire parking area belongs to him. He doesn't show proof. No documents. Nothing. He just expects me to comply, like I assume other neighbors did when faced with his intimidation tactics. To make his point, he puts up private property signs, calls a tow truck to remove my car, and even gets the HOA involved. But here's what he doesn't know. I don't back down from threats. I hired a professional land surveyor and soon had undeniable proof that completely shattered his lies. The court case? Took 10 minutes. When the judge ruled against him, Bob turned pale. And when the demolition crew came to tear down his illegal fence, it was the best show of the year. But let's go back to the beginning. It was supposed to be a quiet Saturday morning, the kind where you sip your coffee on the porch, let the dog laze around in the sun, and pretend, just for a moment, that the world isn't filled with entitled idiots. That moment shattered with an angry, rapid pounding on my front door. Not a polite knock, not even an annoyed one. No, this was the kind of pounding that said, "Open up before I kick this damn door down." I already knew who it was. I sighed, set my coffee down, and braced myself before swinging the door open. And there he was, Bob Henderson, the worst neighbor on the planet. Stocky, red-faced, and puffing up his chest like he was about to challenge me to a duel. The neighborhood's biggest pain in the ass. He had moved in just over a year ago and had spent every waking moment since making everyone's lives miserable. He parked his truck like he was the king of the block, blasted his music at ungodly hours, and filed complaints with the HOA like it was his full-time job. And now, he had set his sights on me. "We need to talk," he snapped, arms crossed. I took a slow sip of my coffee. "Do we?" Bob's scowl deepened. He jabbed a finger toward my driveway. "That's mine," he announced. I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your driveway," he repeated, each word dripping with condescension. "It's on my property. I had a guy check the records. You're encroaching on my land and I'm going to need you to move your crap." I stared at him for a long moment. Then I laughed. "Oh, Bob," I said, shaking my head. "That's cute. My driveway has been here for 30 years. You moved in last year and now you think it's yours?" His lips curled into a smug grin. "I'm just being nice about it. But if you don't take action soon, I will." I took another long sip of my coffee and let out an exaggerated sigh. "Bob, if you actually had any real proof, you'd be waving it in my face. Instead, you're standing here making threats. So how about this? Go ahead and send me something official, and then we'll talk." His smirk widened. "Oh, don't worry. You will." And with that, he stomped off like he had already won. I shook my head, but a sinking feeling settled in my gut. Bob was a snake, and snakes never strike unless they think they have the advantage. 2 days later, I pulled an official-looking envelope from my mailbox. The return address? Bob's lawyer. Inside was a cease and desist letter ordering me to stop using my own driveway because it supposedly violated property boundaries. If I didn't comply, Bob would be forced to take legal action. I almost choked on my coffee. "This guy is actually serious?" I muttered as I shoved the letter toward my wife, Emily. She skimmed it, raising an eyebrow. "He really thinks he's got a case?" "No, he thinks he can bully me into submission," I corrected. "But two can play at that game." That same day, I called a professional land surveyor. If Bob wanted to go legal, I'd hit him twice as hard. But Bob wasn't done. By the end of the week, my driveway had 2 massive private property, no trespassing signs planted on either side. Then he tried to have my car towed. I caught the tow truck guy right before he hooked up my car and shoved my deed, property survey, and driver's license in his face. The driver immediately backed off, apologizing, saying that Bob had reported me for illegally parking on his land. I was fuming. "That's it," I told Emily that night. "I'm taking this straight to the HOA." But the next day, the HOA dropped a bombshell on me. "We were just about to send you a notice," the HOA president, Mrs. Langley, said. I frowned. "Notice about what?" She barely looked up from her desk. "Your driveway violates HOA property regulations." I stared at her. "Excuse me?" "We received a complaint and conducted a preliminary review," she said matter-of-factly. "It appears to be a violation." I clenched my fists. Bob had manipulated the HOA into siding with him. What he didn't know was that I was about to shut him down permanently. That weekend, the land surveyor arrived. For 3 hours, he took precise measurements, checked property markers, and pored over decades-old official records. Bob hovered the entire time, smirking like a wolf who thought he had already won the fight. "You better be ready to pay up," he sneered. I ignored him. 2 days later, the official report landed in my inbox, and the results? Bob was 100% wrong. Not only was my driveway entirely within my property lines, but Bob's fence was actually encroaching on my land by 3 feet. I nearly danced with joy. I marched back to the HOA office with the survey results in hand. "Mrs. Langley," I said, slapping the documents onto her desk, "I suggest you rescind those fines before I take this to court." Her face paled as she flipped through the paperwork. This changes things." "Damn right it does," I said. Bob, of course, refused to accept reality. "That survey is wrong," he yelled. "Then let's take it to court," I shot back. And just like that, Bob's smirk vanished. Bob actually followed through on his threat. He took me to court. The case lasted 10 minutes. The judge barely glanced at the survey results before shutting Bob down completely. His claims were dismissed immediately. But the best part? Bob was ordered to pay all my legal fees. The HOA was forced to rescind my fines, issue an apology, and rewrite their complaint process to prevent future scams. And the cherry on top? Bob was ordered to remove his fence from my property, at his own expense. Watching a demolition crew tear down his illegal fence while Bob stood there, red-faced and seething, was the most satisfying moment of my life. Neighbors watched. Someone even filmed it. Bob tried to rant and rave, but he had 0 credibility left. And me? I walked right past him, onto my perfectly legal driveway, stepped inside my house, and didn't look back.